So when you walk around society and you realize that people are angry, and yet they can be civilized, what you should marvel at for the most part is that despite all the meanness that live inside people, they can still keep their bubbling, all these negative emotions within them. Then, of course, you have mass shootings and you have fightings where people can no longer keep the repressed emotions inside them. So when you're homeless, what happens to you? How much can you take of society's injustice? How much can you take of people's injustice? You scream, you shout, and eventually you have no friends. And the only person you speak to is yourself. But I think there is another kind of homelessness that's far more devastating. You see, Laney College started building these tiny houses for homeless people. And we have it just right behind Henry Kaiser. And so what you have is a community of people who have perhaps no parents, no siblings that they know of, or they see often. But they know each other. And despite all of the difficulties, it's like a commune. They eat together, they talk together, they laugh, they cry. And once in a while, of course, as the rest of us, they throw a fit. That's one aspect of homelessness. That you look, you have no father, you have no mother, and you have no physical shelter. So there is no physical home for your body. Now imagine you have a home, and you have money, and you have a family. And you look at your husband, and you look at your wife, you look at your life, and you realize that despite all the privilege that you've been blessed with, it just doesn't feel like a home. Emotionally, you don't belong. Intellectually, there is nothing to talk about. Spiritually, it's just dead. And you dread going home. You dread looking at your husband or your wife or your kids. You dread going to work. And you can't find any intimacy, any connection, any relatability to anything. What you now suffer from is emotional homelessness. The problem with emotional homelessness is that you talk to your friends, you try to express how you feel on the inside through language. It just doesn't work. Language can't contain your emotions. Your emotions are far too big. You try to think about all the emotions that live inside you, but your intellect is paralyzed. You're trying to figure out why is it that you have this beautiful house, but it just doesn't feel like a home. Why you have a family, and yet you feel so isolated, so alone. So you take your sorry little behind to Barnes and Nobles, and you go to this section on philosophy or religion or self-help, and you try to look at some books, only to realize there are no books out there that can speak to your emotions. And now, for the first time, you realize you're emotionally, intellectually, spiritually homeless. The problem with this particular homelessness is it's very, very difficult to find a commune. It's very difficult to find a tribe or a clan to which you can belong. And so you get depressed. And in depression, you have no friends, you have no family. And I suppose now the question that you need to ask yourself is, which version of homelessness do you prefer? Do you wish to be physically homeless? Do you wish to be emotionally homeless? Do you wish to be intellectually homeless? Or spiritually homeless? Of the spiritual homeless folks that I have read about and seen in my short, pathetic little life, if you read the life of someone like Malcolm X or someone like Jesus, Malcolm is married. He doesn't care for his wife. He is a father. He doesn't care for his kids. He is much more intimate with the ideas that live inside him than anything that lives on the outside. So what you have is a married man who's not really married. He's a father, but he's not really a father. And the same with Jesus. He's got parents, but he doesn't feel like he's got parents. And if you read the Gospel of Luke, especially, you realize that he doesn't say, unlike the Gospel of Matthew, he doesn't take his history all the way back to Abraham, the father of Jews and Christians and Muslims. He takes his history all the way back. It's what they call genealogy, family tree. He takes it all the way back to Adam. He's the father of humanity. He's very, very alone. He has no one. And I guess the truth is that all of us in this class, at some point in our life, we go into our house only to realize it's not a home. Other times you walk in and it's a home. There are times you look at your companion and you feel as if you are in a relationship. Other times you look at him or her and you realize you're completely alone. So, point is, none of us in this class can escape from the fact that we have no choice but to be homeless from time to time. If not physically, then certainly emotionally. If not emotionally, certainly intellectually. If not intellectually, certainly spiritually. All of us are homeless. And the more reflective you are, the more homeless you're going to be. When you ask about power in relationships, I'm thinking or guessing or assuming that you're talking about romantic relationships. Romantic relationships, for the most part, they're great, don't get me wrong. What you need to understand about romance is that it comes with a set of emotions that do not have very much longevity. It's kind of like milk. 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks later, it's expired. And you try to put some milk in your coffee, it comes out as yogurt. And then everything goes bad. That's basically what relationships are. Initially, it smells good, looks good, tastes good. Just give it some time, and then it expires. But what you now have is, for the first time, you have to remove romance out of you and behave responsibly. And God forbid if you're a parent, now there is no way out for you. At least that wasn't the case before. Today the story is different. There are a couple of things you need to consider. First of all, we have our own psychic tensions. In other words, you as a 19-year-old, there are days you wake up and you just feel lost. No one has done anything to you. Your belly is filled with food. You have a wonderful shelter over your head. You have clothes on your back, and yet you feel dissatisfied. Why? Who the hell knows? We are just born to have the software inside us that creates a great amount of number of viruses. Everything just falls apart. Okay? You want to motivate yourself, you just can't. You want to have a conversation with someone, it's just not interesting. You just shut down, you get depressed. And if these moments used to happen for our parents or grandparents, maybe once every 5, 6 months, it happens to all of us like 5, 10, 15, 20 times a day. Okay? And now, you want someone to rescue you from that pit. So you go out there and you find yourself attracted to someone. Why you're attracted, that's a mystery that it's difficult to kind of fathom. So you become attracted, you pursue it, eventually romance, is inspired, and you look at her and you say, I love you, and she says, I love you as well. Well, there is a good amount of intense emotions that will mask all the deficiencies that you have and all the deficiencies that she has. You are, in fact, in the Garden of Eden. And it's beautiful. You have about 3, 4, 5 weeks where you don't see or you don't experience any of the wrinkles that exist for the rest of us. She's always in a good mood. She longs for you, yearns for you, you know. And when you guys go out there, she listens to you like she's worshiping you. But this is not meant to last, you know. And I think you should be wise enough to kind of read between the lines of the wisdom saying in the Gospels that, you know, do not store your treasures down here. To have an identity is great, but to have an identity that time will eventually get in and slowly it begins to erode and you're only left with a memory that'll haunt you for the rest of your life, that's devastating. So nothing down here is going to last. Now, if you happen to be 19, you're extremely raw. You're not finished with school. You don't yet have a job. You're not working in a cubicle 8 hours a day to experience what happens when you go home. You haven't yet experienced responsibilities of paying rent, paying utilities. Right? Add to it the fact that at every different stage in your life, you want different things in your life. If at the age of 19 you wanted romance, at the age of 25 you want someone who is mature. You want someone who will leave you alone. You want someone who is willing to sacrifice their time and go with you to Kaiser. So these are different things that you want. There is another aspect of this that you need to, I think, which is very, very important. It's kind of a lost tradition and it's very difficult to bring back. You know, for thousands of years, Julian, women would gather in the kitchen, they would make food, they would gossip, they would raise their kids in the front yard, all of them together. They would not see their man for about 9, 10, 20 hours. And then the man would come in. They would have food, and then your man would go out and hang out with the men. Women and men occupied different spaces in every single day life. Men and women never frequented as often. You have repressed emotions as a woman. You take care of it through the gossip. Women give meaning to their own kind. They have meaning raising their kids. They have meaning doing their housework. Men, they go out there. They do whatever. They beat up each other. Men beat up men. They come home. They don't look at the woman and say, so how was your day? Fine, that's it, it's finished. They don't see the kids. Men are men and women are women. Today, the story is very, very, very different. You don't have a set of norms or rules anymore that tell men how they should be and tell women how they should be. It's a buffet now. And whenever you have a buffet, if you're ever hungry, don't go to In-N-Out, go to a buffet. Go to a buffet that has like 50 items and you can pick and choose whatever and you eat as much. And I assure you, if you go in there, when you come out, first you have no idea what you have eaten. Second, you're going to go home and you're going to have diarrhea or stomachache. And you're going to say, I'm never going to go through that experience again. You have women who want to be men. You have women who occupy an environment created, designed, sustained by men. And you have men occupying spaces that houses a good number of women. So there's always going to be this friction, always. We've never had it before. And so you're dealing with a lot of confusion that's out there. You know, for the longest time, as a man, your options were limited, really. You get married young, you have children young, you have a job, you pay utilities, you pay rent, and then you die. As a woman, your options are limited. You get married young, you have children, you take care of the house, you hang out with other women, and that's it. What you have now is the rise of capitalism that creates lust and greed and ambition in ways that we have never, ever, ever experienced in the past. So if your question is, how do you resolve power struggles between couples? I actually don't know. I know there are lots of how-to teachers out there, how to sit and communicate, how to sit and listen, how to sit and have a conversation. Because you pretend as if the man and the woman don't belong to the bigger thing called society and all the vicious forces that live in society. It just won't work. Watch one of the most, I suppose, famed teachers these days is a man named Jordan Peterson, about how to have a great marriage, how to have a great conversation. And what he says is really good. There's only one problem. First, Jordan Peterson lived his life in the classroom for about 20, 30 years. He goes home and his wife says, "So how was your day, honey?" "What do you talk about?" "The classroom." So his home is an extension of the classroom. Okay? So he gets some fame and now he goes on the stage. Every time he's on a stage talking about the stuff, he gets about $30,000 to $50,000. $30,000 to $50,000. And so when once in a while he invites his wife on the stage, you know what she does? She says, "Well, Remy, let me read you the questions that have come from the audience." How many of us have the privilege of having a life like that, where your wife reads you questions and then you spend the next 2 hours rambling on? None of us have the luxury. So, some of the issues that currently exist in human relationships, I don't think there is a way to get rid of them, except to find yourself healthy distractions. That's the only way. You can't go home and just look at your companion for 5, 6, 7 hours. It's too much, because the well is going to run dry. What is there to talk about? Nothing. And that's devastating for any relationship. How often can you take your kids to the park before you break? And the other thing is, right now, you have the sole responsibility of raising your kids. Go back about 50 years ago, 60 years ago. You had your aunts, you had your uncles, you had other siblings. You had grandparents, you had neighbors. We don't have any of that stuff. So whatever disease may live inside you, your kids inherit them. When you had extended family, they would correct all the awful things once in a while parents would give. Now it's finished. When you also talk about romance, you need to understand that all of us in this class live in a great amount of poverty. Poverty is loneliness, poverty is confusion, poverty is despair. And all of us are looking for a prince or a princess, charming enough to get us out of that. And you know what happens when you're poor, when you're starving? Anything that smells good, anything that looks good, you have no choice but to gravitate towards it. I don't know if you've ever driven to Los Angeles Highway 99 during summertime. It is scorching hot on the asphalt. So what do you see when you're driving? You see a pool of water. You see a mirage. When you live in poverty, everything out there is like a mirage. Every woman or every man looks good and tastes good and smells good. Every man or woman has the potential to take you out or get you out of the rot you live in. And so when you live in extreme poverty, the only thing that's waiting for you is devastation. And you know how poverty is created? By society, by the environment in which you live. Let me, we have only, what time is it? It's 10:20. So we have 5 minutes? Okay.
34.
Okay. Well, I was going to tell you a story that comes from this book called The Arabian Nights. It's called The 1001 Night, Hazar al-Yakshab. But it'll probably take me an hour, so I'll save that story for Wednesday. Do you have any questions or comments before we go home? Anything else? Yeah, Julian. Right.
There's a lot of your life away. Fall in love with the idea. And then that person fall in love with another person that they don't fall in love with. They fall in love with that. And
So if I was to kind of put something on the board, and this is going to be very quick to a very, very complicated question. We're not going to talk about how love is generated and how it's sustained and how it's protected. But let's just say it contains a set of very, very intense emotions. Now, you can love someone physically, okay? Now, it means that if, for example, you run into Kim Kardashian or Miley Cyrus, whoever you like, Beyonce, okay, Snoop Dogg, if you're attracted to their physical body, emotions will be generated. Those emotions, if they're nourished, they will lead you to love. Now, you could also fall in love with someone's emotions. Now, this is going to be very, 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 very complicated because you can take someone to a coffee shop and they happen to be very depressed, but they're able to tell you the reasons as to why they're depressed. And you speak to them, they speak to you and you listen and they like that. And you like the fact that you're interested in their sad, depressing story. And then once they're telling you their story, once in a while they ask you questions. They ask you for guidance. And so what happens is you fall in love with the emotions that live inside them. In other words, you become interested, and that interest, again, if protected, nourished, sustained, they'll take you to love. Sometimes you fall in love with the way someone thinks about things. Okay? So even though they may not have a very, very great looking physical body, okay, you may find them to be cold and callous because they never get emotional. They're like when you go to military spaces, the top guy who sends his soldiers to the battlefield, he sits back, doesn't shed a tear. He knows what it means to be in a battle. And those soldiers on the field may be crying and screaming. The captain there, nothing. Okay? So you may like the way someone thinks about things. This like can, again, if sustained and protected, lead you to love. There is also this mysterious part. Someone like Jesus, someone like the Buddha, someone like Muhammad, someone who we call to be a spiritual teacher, for example. Now remember, your physical body is a container of emotions, is a container of thoughts, and is a container of spiritual components. Every single one of us in this classroom, one has a lot of this and a little bit of this, maybe none of this. One may have a good amount of reflective powers, a little bit of emotions, a little bit of spirit. One may have a great amount of spiritual components inside them, but not physical emotions. In other words, if, for example, you lose your job, you say God gives and God take it away. You're not going to get depressed. It's the will of God. Okay? So the point I'm trying to make, all of us have these three components. Your body houses emotions, reflections, or thoughts, and the spiritual components. One has 50% emotions, 10% reflective powers or intellect, and say 20% of spiritual stuff. Okay? Now the question is, what exactly are you falling in love with? Okay? Now, if you fall in love with someone's body, for example, that'll generate emotions, generate conversation, create marriage and all sorts. The truth is, this beauty, عشق‌هایی که از پی رنگی بود، عشق نبود، عاقبت ننگی بود. I was driving home. This is like when 9/11 had happened. There were all these. I was part-time instructor, I think, and I was driving to various schools to teach. And so I was listening to radio, and some of the callers would say, "I have the American flag on my car, but the sun keeps hitting the flag, and the colors are fading, and I find it to be disrespectful to the way I feel about the flag in my country. Is there a flag out there where the colors don't fade?" Now, the truth is, if you fall in love with someone's body, there comes a point that color would fade. In other words, there comes a point where the intensity of what we call love, it'll disappear. Because you say, I like the fact that you have six-pack, I like the fact that you're muscular, but the truth is, we need money for rent. And so every time you go home and you say, honey, look at my biceps, says, listen, I don't really care. It was good for 2 weeks. Okay. Now there comes a point where, so let's just say this has a 2-week longevity, shelf life. Let's say you go out with someone who is depressed and she or he looks upon you as the Messiah. You're the only one who can save them. The first maybe 6 or 7 months is really good because it generates great conversations. Tell me about your dad. Tell me about your mom. When you wake up, what happens? Let's go to the gym together. Let's go swimming together. Let's go on trips together. It'll change your mood. Let's go to church together. It'll engage you. After a while, you realize, you know what? You're just exhausted, man. This is like doing homework every single goddamn day. You want someone who is healthy enough, who can stand on their own feet. This, 6 months. Then you want out. You love them. But after 6 months, it's no longer love. You hate. And then you want to feel indifferent towards them. Then sometimes you fall in love with the way someone thinks, like Socrates. He's a great thinker, man. He breaks things open to see what's inside. This has depth. As long as you are interested in the way they think, this will continue. This will inspire great conversations. Okay? If, for example, you are Jordan Peterson and you are the wife, you will always have questions. He's always in the business of observing the social construct, human behavior. He's like a Sigmund Freud. He will never tire you out. He will exhaust you. But this man is a well of amazing fascination. And let's say there comes a point where you grow tired of him just rambling on about all the research that he or she is doing. This is about maybe 10 years. 2 weeks, 6 months, 10 years. If you love someone for 10 years, man, you're blessed. When you love someone for their spirit, now remember, when you love someone for their physical body, you're going to have a good amount of sex. When you love someone for their emotions, you're going to have a great amount of conversation. When you love someone for their intellect, you're going to fall in love with yourself because you ask a lot of questions and you get good answers to a lot of questions. When you fall in love with someone's spirit, they will force you to have your own spiritual components come out of you. And this is the teacher-student relationship, and that sometimes takes a lifelong. The only way this ends is when you die or when he or she dies. So the question is, before you talk about, love and all that, what are you falling in love with? Because if you can understand this, next time you fall in love with someone on the physical stage, you don't need to call 1-900 psychic to figure out how this is going to go. Know for sure 3 weeks later, it is done. After that, it's going to be hemorrhaging, and you're going to put this relationship on life support. When we come back on Wednesday, we'll talk some more. Kevin, you okay?
Oh, yeah.